Thank you for joining me this afternoon for the second of our pre-election media education briefings. The Department of State wants to make sure reporters have the information you need to keep your readers, viewers, and listeners accurately informed and updated on what they need to know to cast their vote in the November 8th election. We also want to pre-bunk before the election as much mis- and disinformation out there as possible. And we're counting on you and the media to help us correct that mis- and disinformation, which in many cases is designed to make it harder for some Pennsylvanians to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Before I dive into the meat of today's discussion, I know many of you will want to ask about the current litigation involving Fulton County, as well as recent court orders related to the counting of undated ballots and ballot curing. Because those cases are still in active litigation, I will be unable to answer any questions on those topics today. What I can talk about is how the vote counting process works in Pennsylvania, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. Right now, with 15 days to go until the election, county election offices are training their poll workers for the over 9,100 polling places in Pennsylvania. They are performing logic and accuracy testing on their polling place voting equipment to ensure that it functions as expected and accurately reads and tabulates votes as marked. They also have been processing voter registration applications in advance of today's deadline to register to vote in the November 8th election. And they are processing mail-in and absentee ballot request forms and will continue to do so through the deadline to apply, which is November 1st. Voting is already underway, and as of today, voters have requested 1,290,977 mail-in and absentee ballots, and they have returned 556,758, or 43% of them. As a reminder, you can find the latest mail-in and absentee ballot numbers on our website at vote.pa.gov/counting. There, we provide a daily mail ballot report spreadsheet that is updated at noon each day and shows breakdowns of requested and returned ballots by county and by party. As I have talked about many times before, Pennsylvania does not have pre-canvassing of mail ballots before Election Day, although counties, the Wolf administration, and stakeholders support it. That is something we hope the General Assembly will act on in the future. One thing the General Assembly did do this summer was pass legislation that became Act 88, which provided counties with additional public funding for elections. 63 of Pennsylvania's 67 counties applied for Act 88 election integrity grants, which means they must begin pre-canvassing mail-in ballots at 7 a.m. on Election Day, and they must pre-canvass and canvass continuously until all the mail ballot votes are counted. The other 4 counties who did not apply for the Act 88 grant money, that's Bradford, Susquehanna, Crawford, and Montour, must begin pre-canvassing mail ballots at some point on Election Day. While the pre-canvassing process differs among counties in some ways, there are general procedures that all counties follow. Pre-canvassing entails opening each mail ballot's outer envelope, separating the inner secrecy envelope from the outer envelope, intermingling the unopened secrecy envelope with the other unopened secrecy envelopes, then opening the inner secrecy envelope, unfolding and flattening ballots for scanning, and scanning those ballots. That work is done by each county's canvassing board, which is made up of employees and assistants appointed by the County Board of Elections. The County Board of Elections itself is the body that ultimately has responsibility for certifying the results of the election. In most counties, the County Board of Elections consists of 3 county commissioners. During that pre-canvassing work, the canvassing board members are evaluating each mail ballot to determine its eligibility to be counted. That includes checking to ensure the ballot came from a qualified registered voter who provided proper identification when they requested their ballot. Any ballots that cannot be immediately verified are set aside for the Board of Elections to adjudicate later. All decisions regarding the disposition of ballots are made by a majority vote of the members of the County Board of Elections. Remember, all of this pre-canvassing work can only begin at 7 a.m. on Election Day. And it occurs while county election officials are also administering 13 hours of in-person voting. One question the department frequently gets is whether counties count mail-in and absentee ballots before or after ballots cast in person on Election Day. The answer to that question is that it varies by the county, depending on their workflow procedures. After 8 p.m. on election night, the best place for you to find the breakdown of which ballots have been counted so far in each county is on our elections return website, which is electionreturns.pa.gov. New this year is a requirement under Act 88 that the 63 grant-receiving counties must report on their election websites no later than 12:01 a.m. on November 9th, the day after the election, the total number of mail ballots they received for the election. Remember, that is the number of mail ballots received, not the actual vote count of those ballots. I want to emphasize here that throughout the voting and ballot counting process, people who have been chosen by candidates and political parties are present to observe the integrity of the whole process. For example, poll watchers appointed by candidates and political parties can be present at polling places to observe in-person election day voting. And authorized representatives can be present at the meetings of the County Board of Elections to observe pre-canvassing and canvassing. Counting votes and reporting the results take time. Election officials are focused on accuracy over speed. The election code says that county returns boards must begin to canvass and tabulate returns no later than 9 a.m. on the Friday after the election, which in this case is November 11th. And they must continue canvassing through the 8th day after the election, which is November 16th. Meanwhile, voters who cast absentee and mail-in ballots but did not initially provide proper ID have until Monday, November 14th to provide that ID to their county elections office. And military and overseas civilian ballots may be received until 5 p.m. on November 15th. No later than 5 p.m. on November 15th, county election offices must submit unofficial results to me. Canvassing boards continue their canvass through November 16th, though to ensure that all eligible military and overseas civilian ballots are counted. Then between November 15th and November 27th, counties conduct a risk limiting audit and a statutorily required fixed percentage statistical audit of the results. By November 28th, the 67 county boards of elections must certify their official election results and then must certify a copy of the official results to me. I then, as acting Secretary of the Commonwealth, compile and certify official results for all federal and state offices as soon as possible after receiving them. Depending on the specific office, I must certify the official election results to the appropriate authority. So, for example, I must certify the U.S. Senate race results to the Secretary of the U.S. Senate. I hope this explanation of why counting all legally cast ballots in Pennsylvania is a days-long process has been helpful for you today. The counting process exists to ensure every eligible voter has the opportunity to cast their ballot and to have their vote count. As the November 8th election draws closer, we will continue to meet voters where they are to educate them about voting rules and deadlines, and to set realistic expectations for when election results will become available. Again, we appreciate the media's help in getting out the word that voters, candidates, and the public should not expect complete results on election night. And now I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Secretary Chapman. My name is Amy Gooley. I am the Communications Director for the Pennsylvania Department of State. Secretary Chapman will now take one question per reporter from those who requested to ask a question when they RSVP'd. I will call on reporters in the order that they RSVP'd. First, we will go to WJAC TV. Crispin Havener, please ask your question. WJAC, please unmute yourself to ask your question. Okay, we will move on and try to come back. Lisa Desjardins from PBS NewsHour, please unmute and ask your question.
Hello, thank you guys so much for doing this. I appreciate it. Thank you, Amy, as well. A couple questions. First, just to clarifying, as these counties are certifying the results to you on those days, including November 15th, can you just indicate, do you think that you will post that immediately? Are you posting those results as they come in? And then my second question is just about security, any possible security threats. I'm wondering if you or your staff, if you've increased security this year, what kind of threats you may or may not have gotten. And if you could confirm that the counties are responsible for Dropbox security and not your office.
Well, thank you for all of those questions. I think when it comes to certification, we will not release results county by county. We're going to wait and release those results when we have all of those certification results from counties. So, please be tuned for that. November 28th is the deadline for certification. So we will definitely post those results when November 28th occurs. As far as security concerns, yes, my office has received threats in recent months, actually in recent weeks, in particular after the Supreme Court decision just a few weeks ago. And a lot of these threats are fueled by mis and disinformation. And that's why we're doing media briefings like this. It's really important for us to get accurate information about the elections process in Pennsylvania. So voters and the public know that, when there's delays in counting, it doesn't mean that there's anything nefarious happening. It's just what the law is in Pennsylvania. But, it's unfortunate that we've received those threats. We are working with our federal and state partners to ensure that, my staff is protected, as well as county election offices. I know county election offices have also been the subject of threats. And we've had many trainings with our federal partners, including DHS and FBI, on those threats. When it comes to drop boxes, we have guidance on our website, which is vote.pa.gov, on best practices for securing drop boxes for counties. And that's something that you can go on our website and see, but it is up to the county as far as, what type of drop boxes are going to have, what type of security, as well as the location and the hours for those drop boxes.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Lisa, for the question. Next up is Brian Lanus with Fox News. Brian, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you again for holding this press conference. I wanted to ask just based on the number of mail-in ballots that have been returned, where are we? Is this huge voter turnout? Is the pace on par for previous years? And my last question here is about the importance of Act 77. There's been a lot in the press about whether or not Act 77, campaign against Act 77 mail-in balloting. Can you talk about what you make of any efforts to get rid of Act 77 and the importance of mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we have daily mail ballot reports on our website where you can see we upload them around noon every single day, and you can see how many mail-in ballots have been approved and how many have been returned. We also have a breakdown by political party. It's really hard to compare. There really is no apples to apples comparison because Act 77 didn't pass until 2019. So as you know, midterms usually have lower turnout. We don't have a midterm election to compare the mail-in ballot numbers to. So it's hard to tell if turnout's going to be really high. But what I can say is that, we're having a lot of national attention when it comes to the elections here in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of races on the ballot. And so we are expecting a large turnout, especially through mail-in voting this year. And as far as Act 77 question, it's important for voters to know that mail-in voting is the law of the land. And that's something that we are doing through our voter education efforts. We're making sure that we are educating voters about how to request a mail-in ballot if they choose to, and that it's the law of the land and that they're entitled to vote by mail if they would like.
Thank you, Secretary. And thank you, Brian, for the questions. Next, we'll go to Justin Schweitzer with City and State PA. Justin, please unmute yourself to ask your question.
Hi, Secretary. Thanks so much for doing this. My question centers around efforts from certain conservative grassroots groups urging voters to hold on to their mail ballots until Election Day and turn them in then as a means, they say, to cut down on fraud or illegal voting or whatever it might be. I wanted to just check in and see, is the department aware of any pushes like this in Pennsylvania? And what guidance would you give to voters who might think that, waiting to turn in their mail ballots may, for whatever reason, prevent fraud or certain bad actors?
We have heard that there's messaging out there in Pennsylvania as far as, instructing voters to hold on to their mail-in ballots. As part of our voter education campaign, we encourage voters to request that mail-in ballot now and return it as soon as possible. We don't want voters to delay because there's a potential that they could be disenfranchised. And, voters need to know that you can return a mail-in ballot via mail, the U.S. Postal Service, at a drop box if your county has them, or in person at your county office on Election Day. And the county has to receive the mail-in ballot by 8 p.m. on Election Day. So we would hate for there to be a scenario where a voter, holds on to that ballot too long and is disenfranchised as a result. So our messaging at the Department of State is for voters to request that mail-in ballot and to return it as soon as possible.
Thank you for the question, Justin. We'll go to Jan Murphy at Penn Live next. Jan, please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Secretary, and thank you so much for doing this. I was wondering if we could go back to these concerns about threats that have been made, and if you could speak to if you think the level of threats that you're hearing now is more than in past, elections since 2020, and if there are additional safeguards that are being put in place that you can speak to for election workers and poll watchers as well. And then finally, is this a problem in a particular area of the state that you're sensing? Thank you.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned, it's the mis and disinformation about the election process in Pennsylvania that is really fueling these threats. So it's important for us to make sure that we're getting out trusted sources of information, accurate information about how voters can cast their ballot and ensure that it's counted here in Pennsylvania. I just started in January, so I don't have all the stats about how this compares to prior years. But what I can say is since 2020, since I've been in office in January, we have constantly met with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, just to talk through what the current threat landscape is and tools that we can give our counties to ensure that they have physical security protection as well as cybersecurity protection. So it's been great to partner with both the federal and state law enforcement organizations. We're in constant communication with them, and it's a situation that we're monitoring, as we're 15 days away from the election.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Christina Cassidy with the Associated Press. Christina, please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much. I wanted to drill a little bit deeper into security and particularly threats to the vote counting process. Back in 2020, we saw, people flooding to election offices. We saw some confrontations outside election offices. Certainly the TCF Center, we recall what was going on there. And so I'd like for you to talk through, to the best that you can, any measures that have been taken to improve physical security, protect workers, and sort of preserve the vote counting process. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that question. As I mentioned, we partner with the Department of Homeland Security. They've actually gone to various counties throughout the state and have done security assessments, physical security assessments, and counties have made adjustments to their election infrastructure based on those recommendations. And, there's been election funding, both federal dollars and also state dollars that have gone to counties. So counties have been able to use those funds to shore up their physical security protection. So whether that's building a fence or deploying other measures. So it's something that a lot of counties have taken advantage of, which is great. And we can provide more information to you after the call as far as details if you would like.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Zach Montalaro with Politico. Zach, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey all, thanks for doing this. My question was just going to be about physical security, so I think we probably covered it, but I will follow up with you for those additional details. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Next, we'll go to Elise Person with CBS 21. Elise?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much again for having us and hosting us. I just wanted to start by, I know you gave some dates as to deadlines and when certain mail-in ballots and absentee ballots will be counted, but for the general public after election day, people can be a little impatient. When can voters expect to see some of those results? And as well, backing that up too, I know you said you can't really say much in terms of those ballot curing, but has there been any direction given to counties in terms of they should be reaching out to voters who might need to fix their ballots? Just trying to, with us only less than almost 2 weeks to go till election day, what are counties being directed to do in terms of that?
Sure. So I can't go into the details about the ballot curing because it is active litigation. So unfortunately, I'm not able to go into detail about that. But as far as election results are concerned, we're expecting results to take at least a few days to have unofficial results on for Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, counties aren't able to start pre-canvassing mail-in and absentee ballots until 7 a.m. on election day. So because of that, it takes time. This is the same time that voters are voting in person at their polling place. And so counties have to, remove them from the outer envelope, the inner secrecy envelope, flatten them, scan them, and they're not permitted to release any results until 8 p.m. on election night. So it's going to take a few days. That doesn't mean anything bad is happening. It's just the election process playing out. We are ensuring that election officials are ensuring that every single vote is counted. So until we have pre-canvassing legislation, like some other states, like Florida, for instance, that's able to call unofficial returns on election night, we will unfortunately have that delay. I know everybody wants to have election results sooner, and it's something that we support at the Department of State and the administration supports. We are supportive of having at least 2 weeks of pre-canvassing time so counties aren't stressed on election day and the days following. And that's something that has bipartisan support from the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elise. We will next go to Sanika from ABC 27. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Secretary. Thank you for having this press conference. You mentioned that county election officials are processing voter registration applications because today's the deadline. Can you just talk about voters who still haven't registered, what they can do today, and what your message is to people who aren't registered?
Yes, so today is the deadline to register to vote. If you want to participate in the November 8th election, you can go on our website, vote.pa.gov. You can register to vote online. It's very easy to do that. We also encourage people to check your voter registration status. You know, if you haven't voted in a while, if you want to update your address, you can also check your voter registration status as well. And while you're online, if you want to vote by mail, you can request that mail-in ballot right now. And the county will mail it out to you in a few days and you can vote it and send it back. So if you go to our website, vote.pa.gov, it has comprehensive information. Also, if you have any questions, we have a voter hotline, which is 1-877-VOTES, VOTES, PA. And I encourage, voters, if you have any questions about how to register or how to vote, you can call that hotline and a real person will walk you through it.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to David Payne from Radio PA. David, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks, and thank you for doing this again, Secretary. I know that a few weeks ago, counties were putting out the word about poll workers, people who actually work the polls on election day. Are there enough in every county? Have you heard from any counties that are having any shortages? And also, on after the election itself, is there a contingency for any county in the event of any county that refuses to certify the results?
Yeah, so as far as poll workers, we had a sign up on our website, and we were very happy to see a lot of people all throughout the Commonwealth who have been willing to serve as poll workers. So the last time I checked, I think we had around 9,000 signups on our website. And as you know, there's always a poll worker shortage in Pennsylvania, even before the pandemic. It was hard to recruit poll workers, and the pandemic really exacerbated that. So it's something that we work with stakeholder groups, with the counties to ensure that they have fully staffed polling places. Also in certain counties to ensure that they're poll workers who can speak multiple languages like Spanish and Chinese as well. So it's something that we're working on currently at the Department of State, but we have 9,100 polling places in the Commonwealth, and to have them fully staffed, that would require 45,000 poll workers. So it's around 5 poll workers per polling place. So I haven't heard anything recently from counties, but before we started that recruitment effort, counties were saying that they wanted our help to recruit poll workers this election, and that's what we have done.
Thank you. We'll go to our last question from Tom Lehman from WGAL. Tom, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Secretary, we've heard from a lot of viewers who have said they're having issues getting their mail delivered, and obviously that is a vehicle for a lot of these mail ballots and how they get to county election offices. Have you had any communications with the Postal Service about trying to make sure that ballots get delivered on time for the election deadline?
Yes, that's a very good question. And we do have conversations with the United States Postal Service. Our counties do as well. They always host us for calls before the election. And I have heard about, some recent delays through the United States Postal Service. One thing that we are messaging to voters, if you are going to mail in your mail-in or absentee ballot through the U.S. Postal Service, I would do so at least a week before the election, so it can, get there on time, because the county must receive that mail-in or absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day. So I would make sure that, as I said, if you want to vote by mail, request it right now, vote that ballot, return it by mail as soon as possible. But if you're going to return it after that week, you should go to a drop box if your county has one, or you can deliver it by hand in person at your county elections office. But it's something that we have talked with the U.S. Postal Service. They expedite mail-in ballots, so that's something that they do. But if anybody's nervous about their ballot getting there on time, I would really encourage people to mail it at least a week before the election.
What should somebody do if they have already requested a ballot or they haven't received it and they're dealing with mail issues and they're concerned, hey, I already requested this. It's supposedly coming in the mail, but it hasn't arrived yet. Like you said, you want to get it a week out, but a lot of people may not even have it a week out. What are your recommendations there?
Sure. You can always call your county elections office and ask them where it is in the pipeline. You can call us. Our hotline is 1-877-VOTES-PA, 1-877-VOTES-PA. And if there's a scenario where you've requested your mail-in ballot, you haven't received it, you can go in person to vote on election day at the polling place, but you will vote a provisional ballot. But the first thing to do is to call your election office or call us to see what we can do to make sure that ballot gets to you. And then if you're within that week, as I mentioned, you should hand deliver it through a drop box or at your county elections office.
Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Secretary, for your time. A recording of this press conference will be available later today on pacast.com, which will also have a press release available, as well as a graphic that breaks down the election results timeline for you. For more information, or if you have additional questions, please contact the Department of State Press Office at ra-st-press@pa.gov. That's ra-st-press@pa.gov. Thank you all for your time. Have a great day.